Welcome back to In Pursuit of Magic, where we explore the things that inspire us, connect us, and the magic we find along the way. I'm Matthew Medina, and today's very special guest is a talented guitarist, composer, producer, and educator, currently based in New York City. Originally from Markham, Canada, they are a Berklee College of Music graduate whose career has taken them from the stages of Broadway shows like Titanique to touring and recording with artists like Mark Ambor into studios and classrooms where they help shape the next generation of musicians. Whether they're laying down intricate guitar parts, programming shows, composing original music, or teaching private lessons, they bring a unique blend of technical excellence, creativity, and real world experience to everything they can do. And contrary to what Marla Mendel may call them, they are not Nick Jonas. I'm
I'm not.
very excited to welcome Alex Mak to the podcast. Alex, thanks for being on. It's just so exciting to have you be on this podcast and talk about this show because I've been having other guests on and really diving into this incredible show that it's like the little show that could and keeps getting bigger and keeps coming back bigger and better and stronger and bringing so much joy. So I'm curious about your journey and just your inspirations, I guess, to start with. What made you want to be a musician and was inspired to get into music?
Mm. Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, going way back, it started pretty early for me. My family's not particularly musical, but my dad and mom both love music. And growing up, especially, my dad really hit me to a lot of the music he was listening to. He played a lot of guitar around the house, just as a like amateur. But I grew up on a lot of like the Stones, AC/DC, like that solid 70s, 80s dad rock era was huge for me. And that was kind of everything I knew. I mean, when we were listening to the radio, it was that kind of music. So that was kind of my North Star for everything. And I started playing an instrument right around like, I think I was 4 or so. My dad had some guitars around the house, so he had shown me the basics. Back then, I guess still kind of in the tail end of the VHS era, they'd have those little stickers that you'd use to like label the tapes and whatnot. So you'd put the numbers in for the frets of the guitar. So you could have like fret 1, 2, 3, 4. So no, he put in the time. And I did that for a little bit. And then I started piano and guitar lessons not too long after and just kept up with it through school. So it's funny. I mean, probably as a kid, I would have had the same idea as I have now of what I want to do, which is very fortunate, very fortuitous. But it's also a little funny too that I don't know how much that arc is, how much has grown, how much has developed since then. Like, I still
For
just
sure
love
it
playing and
has.
doing the thing.
I mean, for sure it's grown. I just looking at your career and your education and then you're teaching others and what you're doing day to day is just amazing. So I think you've definitely grown with it. And I think the beauty of it is that you still love it. You love what you're doing. There's a lot of magic in that. And I know within that journey, it's not always easy. There's always going to be obstacles and hardships and closed doors or things that maybe you thought you were headed and then it doesn't turn out that way and you go somewhere else and you're surprised by that. And so for you, when the hard moments come and obstacles come your way, how do you manage to overcome those moments and not let it put out your fire?
Hmm. I think when it comes to obstacles and whatnot, being a freelancer, living in New York City, there's always going to be a thing or two always on the back burner that I think you have to be conscious of. And whether it's with me, I'm from Canada originally. So even just the process of working here and doing all of that by the book is definitely takes a lot of time in preparing for what's called an artist visa, an O1. Definitely spent a lot of hours, and when I initially had to do that around like 3 years ago or so, and then got to do it again in a few months. But that's one thing. But ultimately, I think being able to do the thing you love is such a gift unto itself. And with music, it's one of those things where if you make a mistake, no one's getting hurt, no one's dying, which is very lucky. There's a lot more, I don't want to say higher stakes professions out there, but there's a lot of things where there might be a little less of a safety net when it comes to what you end up doing. So to be able to make a living right now doing this thing, I'd take the difficulties of that over a very even, maybe path, doing something that I'm less attuned to or something that means less to me. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is you had a calling to it from such a young age and then put in the work to learn and to keep learning and to pick up more than one skill, which I keep hearing from a lot of artists is so important to like spread your passions around, to dip your toe into different things because it's hard sometimes when you want to define yourself by just one very narrow thing and put yourself in a box when really you may not fit into that box specifically. You may fit into a bunch of boxes, which is a beautiful thing too. And it shows with everything that you're doing.
For
And you
sure.
mentioned coming from Canada and moving to the city and your artist visa. So what was that process like in terms of adjusting to just being in New York City?
Yeah, no, it was interesting. So, from just outside of Toronto, originally a suburb, Markham, great place to grow up. But when I started thinking about college and everything after high school, I was realizing that a lot of the stuff that inspired me and a lot of the work that I'd see myself doing in the future, there is less opportunities in my the Toronto metro area than other spots. And when I looked at people I looked up to, there's a large proliferation of those folks in New York City or LA, like one of those two centers. So I had the idea that it would probably make more sense. My ceiling might be a little higher if I figured out a way to make it work going to the States. I ended up going to Berklee College of Music in Boston, which was great. And I owe a lot of work to it. Titanique indirectly actually came through that. So I was there, started in 2019, second semester, COVID. So I'm going back to Canada for a year and a half, pretty much, which was interesting, but you do what you got to do. We ended up getting, I ended up doing around another year or so in person, and then I got out of school and moved straight to New York. So, long story short, New York, for me, I was thinking of it relative to Boston because that was the spot where I'd been most recently before that. And it took me a second. My girlfriend, she's from here originally, and she was very helpful in just getting me used to the pace of the city. Because I think ultimately, the thing about New York, as you know, is the baseline kind of level of energy is just always going to be so much higher than if you're in a suburb or a more rural area. So that kind of resting spot, you're still hearing cars coming by. There's always something going on around you. You're always surrounded by people. Like the environment, definitely, I think people can be a little on edge at first and just trying to navigate transit, all of that stuff. It's a lot. So it took me a solid, I'd say, season or so, like a solid summer before I started feeling like I could settle in. And now it feels like home. It's been pretty much 5 years since then.
Yeah, I could imagine that being a big adjustment. And, New York is also one of those places where it's so big and there's so many people. And yet you could also get very lonely sometimes. And I talk about it a lot with people in terms of following their dreams, but it's so funny how in following a dream that could feel like such a lonely path when there's so many other people with a similar dream. And it's all about finding your people and community. And what do you think that has played in your life and how has that helped your journey?
Hmm. I think that's one of the big traps when you're working in the arts or any kind of field where a lot of people have that passion independent of the commerce side of things. And I think it can be very easy to fall in with, it can be difficult to make friends outside of your work group, which is also, going to be a great group of people. But at the end of the day, though we're doing what we love, it's still work. And it's just one subset of the greater ecosystem that is the city. So I think part of it is creating opportunities to allow yourself to get to know people outside of work or more like work sanctioned things. Like there's so much value in being able to talk to people and have those connections that aren't tied to doing the thing you're doing 23 hours a day. And being able to just have that and have relationships that aren't centered around that, I think can be very grounding for people. So I guess if you're able to find outlets where you're just, Alex the person and not Alex the musician, that can really be nice. And you'll always have connections that are through the music or whatever art, but having lanes for both, I think, is very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's very important because it's all about your identity and how you see yourself. And you're more than one thing. And that's the beauty of it also, just keeping that in mind because sometimes it's amazing to feel that you're whatever you are trying to be because that's your love and that's your passion and it feeds something in your soul. And then there's other times where that part of your life might be a little harder. And then to define yourself by just that can be really disheartening if you're in a phase of your life where things aren't working the way you want them to. And it doesn't mean they won't again, but when you're in that phase, it's hard not to take that as something that equates to your value as a person, which isn't true. And reminding yourself of that is super important. And I could assume that, your time at Berkeley also was really integral to your journey and not just learning, but just being around other people and doing something you love. So, for you, what key lessons or experiences from Berklee continue to influence your work, both as a performer and an educator?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much going there. One thing I was really fortunate with going to Berklee specific as a guitarist is a lot of schools, if you were to study guitar, you're going down either a classical path or a jazz path. And within each of those paths, there might be at most maybe like 2 to 3 teachers that are responsible for private instruction. With Berklee, though, there's probably got to be more than 50 teachers on the faculty, each of whom is specializing in kind of a different subset of the instrument, whether it's classical guitar, a steel string fingerpicking, slide guitar, blues, jazz. It's almost, I always think of it, it's the Chinese menu approach to an education where you can kind of get a bit of everything, which is so much fun if you know what you want. And that's a big if, I mean, which is tough. And some people do better in a more regimented environment. Others like that openness that it has. I was one of those people in that latter category. And being able to, I think, especially as I was finishing up my time there, talk to professors who had a lot of professional experience in the city, what it was like working around here, leading rehearsals, working with other people. There's so many interpersonal things. And there's a lot that goes into doing the art that isn't strictly of the technical variety or the theory based. So having the ability to talk to people that have been in the same positions that you have about like what's the most effective way to spend like 2 3 hours to get to teach a band a few songs. Like once you start to, for me, when I started to get those lessons, I was getting things that I could take into more situations than I would have otherwise, whether it's becoming a better teacher one on one or becoming a better communicator. Like everything, it was having a holistic perspective on things that helped things out a lot.
That's amazing. And it sounds like having so many different professors that have kind of different little, I guess, specific areas where they excel and approaches to things also help you to figure out what your approach would want to be and what you want to focus on, which I think is a beautiful thing because yeah, to have so much to kind of explore and choose from kind of opens you up to figure out who you are.
Right.
So
I
that's what
mean,
it sounds like.
I'm always telling people sometimes when I'm teaching, your knowledge of any field, it's kind of like a martini glass where the bottom 90% contains as much as the top 10%. And if you start down here, you just realize there's more and more that there you don't know. And it's very liberating once you get over that initial kind of shock of what there is out there. And Berkeley was one of those things too. Like there's so many fields that I wasn't aware of or paths you could take that I didn't know you could take. Whether it's, I hadn't done much theater stuff when I was there, but I knew there were people that did, or people that were doing more production sides of things. So working on like advertising music or music for documentaries. There's a lot of different avenues and there's so many phenomenal artists in their own right that were doing things, but it wasn't a by the book approach. Everyone kind of had their own way to get where they did, which is, I think, very encouraging for a young person.
Yeah, I think you're right because to think that there's only one path to get to somewhere is crazy because there's so many different paths to things. And like you said, there's so many different types of careers out there, especially in music. And there's half the time, I hear stories of people who they say you may not know their name, but you know their work.
For
And
sure, yeah.
it lives like and it's like unmistakable. So I think that's a beautiful part about music too. And your journey from starting in Canada and kind of learning on your own and then going to Berkeley eventually ended up leading you to get involved with Titanique. So you had said before then you hadn't had much theater experience. So how did you get involved with Titanique and be part of this joyous show?
Yeah, it was extremely lucky. And I'm very thankful that things worked out the way it did. I think with kind of going back to what we were talking about with opportunities, there's always these lucky breaks that happen. And it's just inevitable the more time you spend around certain areas and certain communities, stuff like that. And it's a matter of being ready when that moment comes, which is so difficult because you don't know when it will be or what it will be. I had done some theater stuff in high school, played in a few pits. I played bass for Anything Goes, I think. I played guitar in Crazy for You, I believe. I'd done a few shows then. And essentially what had happened, fast forward in a few years, I graduated and Berkeley had this program called the Alumni Mentor Network, which was a really fancy way of basically pairing up students with alumni that were in the city that they were planning on moving to that had done the same field of study. So my mentor was a great guitarist in the city, Matt Long, who were still great friends. And Matt was the original chair of the show off Broadway. So when we had initially connected, Matt had seen some of my playing. He had asked if I was interested in subbing, which was very kind of him to extend that olive branch. So I took him up on it and really enjoyed it. Just the process of learning the book, getting to do the show, interact with the actors. It was a good job. It was a lot of fun. And it didn't feel like work, which is, I think, always important. A few months went by that summer. So the show had opened, I think, like June of 2022. And then he had decided to leave the show at the end of October of that month. So Nicholas, the music supervisor and music director, he had asked if I wanted to take over the chair. So I accepted. And then, yeah, 4 years later, we're here.
That's incredible. And it goes to show also that you never know where things will lead because now it's on Broadway, which is huge. And so what has that transition been like for you? You're also juggling like high profile live gigs, theatrical programming with Titanique and session work and teaching. So how have you managed to like find that balance where you juggle everything?
Hmm. I think it's interesting with work. When you're doing freelance stuff in the city, I find you always have to wear a multitude of hats. Like it's very common with a lot of musicians, performers, they also have some sort of teaching component to what they're doing or clinics, the gigs. A lot of people are also doing wedding bands or general event gigs, what we call club dates in the city. So I think it's always been ingrained since I moved to the city that you have to be doing a few different things. You can't have that one track thing. When I was doing the show off Broadway, honestly, it was probably a little busier than it is for me now on a day to day. At one point, I was teaching around, I think, 20, 22 people a week or so, and I didn't have a day off scheduled, which, yeah, I couldn't do that now. But we had the show, which was 6 days, and then I'd always be doing something on the off day. And it was fun. I was doing stuff I enjoyed, but it was taking a lot out of me. Anyways, as the show started to get a little more established, we unionized, which was very thankful and also gave us a lot more security. Then I was able to kind of have a little more break time built in. That's when I started doing more touring, some more session stuff. And really, honestly, touring when I'm on the road, that's probably the easiest job in one sense, because you only have to do one thing a day. Versus when I'm in the city, I always end up doing like two, three things for two, three different groups.
It's amazing just to think of you juggling all that because I just know in general working in theater, it's a lot. It's a busy schedule. And
Sure,
it
yeah.
takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of heart. And so I give it up to you and everyone who's part of the production because you put your all into it and it shows. In the show, there's this really funny moment where Marla as Celine introduces you as Nick Jonas. So I'm curious if where did that originate? Did it start off Broadway, that joke, and then carried on, or did Marla make it up?
So as long as I've been doing the show, it's that joke's always been there. But what you might not know is every night she says a different person, or typically says a different person. So it'll be anywhere from Olivia Rodrigo, Reba McEntire. I think I got Lenny Kravitz last night or something.
Oh,
But
that's so
that's been
funny.
going on. When Nicole Parker was Celine, she called me by my name for her last show, which was very sweet of her. But yeah, the show is I think they had written the show, the four of them, in around like 2016, 2017. And they had been showcasing this show for years before it did that off Broadway run. They had done a cabaret run at one of the venues in the city. They'd done some stuff in LA. I'm pretty sure that that joke's been there long before I have. And it'll probably be there long after I'm here too. That's funny.
Well, it's such a standout moment. It's so funny. I'll talk to people who have seen it after me, and they'll always point out that moment as being like such a funny, fun moment. And I'm like, yeah, that stood out to me too, which is great. And I know the whole production celebrating all the Tony nominations right now, which is incredible. I think I read somewhere that there might be a Tony performance, and I'm wondering, like, how does that work in terms of the music? Like, is it pre-recorded? Are you guys there?
Great question. You might know as much as I do, honestly. I haven't heard anything about it. I mean, we just did the Today Show.
Yeah.
I think that was 2 days ago or so, or yesterday. And for that, basically, because we have an 18-piece orchestra now on Broadway, which is phenomenal. It's one of the biggest orchestras in New York right now. And because of those logistics, we went to the Power Station, which is a studio up in Midtown that a lot of the shows do their cast albums and whatnot, and we did a pre-record session. So I think we did, around if I recall correctly, a 3-hour session, and we knocked out probably around 6 tracks from the show, just so they could use them for the Today Show. And then I think they also had a few in the bank so that if they wanted to do something like the Tonys, they'd have those ones available.
Well,
That
that's
ends up
amazing.
generally, yeah. So I think a lot of shows, from what I understand, I mean, I'm still a small fry in this whole thing, especially with the theater guitars. There's people that have been doing this much longer than I have. But a lot of shows will pre-record the musicians and then have live vocals on top. And then if a show is a smaller band, sometimes you'll see that band for the actual televised performance. But with TV, there's so many logistics. I've done it a few times with Mark, the artist that I work with, and it's interesting. There's a lot of extenuating factors beyond just playing the notes.
I can imagine. And what's awesome about that though is that it's still you guys playing the music,
For sure, yeah.
which makes me really happy that, it's you guys because you guys bring it to life every night. So that's incredible.
Yeah, no, it's we're very lucky with that. And it's one of those things too where certain award shows like the Oscars or I believe the Grammys too, they'll have a house band that plays for everything. And it's some of the best musicians, in the world that are doing this. But with this show has kind of been our life. Like it's been all of our lives for the last few months, and having to do it, 6 days a week. Like that's a relationship that you can't really separate just based on the time that we've done it. So the attention that everyone in that orchestra brings to the show, the care, like it's really special. And I'm fortunate getting to have headphones, listen, and play the show. Like I always think I have the best seat in the house because I can see the actors before they come on stage, and I can hear the band real clearly too, which is wonderful.
It's incredible. And it sounds like so much fun. And also I hear everyone talk about each other on every part of this production, whether it's backstage or in the orchestra or the crew or the actors. And everyone just has like this love for each other. Like it really does feel like a great community in this production, which I've heard from other people you don't always get. And when it happens, that's magic. And you juggle a lot of things, like we said, you wear a lot of hats. And so I was reading about some of the stuff that you do, and you use tools like fractal audio systems, which I don't know too much about, but I know it's involving technology. So what role does technology play in your tone composing process and even in the live performances?
Yeah, yeah. Not to get too geeky with it, but those fractal units you mentioned, it's nothing crazy mathematical or anything. That's just the brand. They make great processors for guitars and other instruments so that you can essentially get the sound that you traditionally get by playing through an amplifier with a speaker without any sound physically coming out of the unit. So it's really helpful when you're playing on stage because with singers, they really rely on being able to hear themselves and select elements of the band. So the quieter the stage can be, a lot of times the better singer's pitch will be and their time feel. So if you notice with Titanique, for example, we have the electric drums on stage right, which again keeps sound down quite a bit. And then both of those guitars, the bass, we're all running direct to avoid any sound happening on stage. And I guess the thing with guitarists is we're very persnickety about tone. And it's because the instrument's electric as opposed to acoustic, the tone is very much a big part of what you're putting out and your feel when you're playing. It's a very kind of intimate relationship you have. So making sure that sound is right is it's something that I think a lot of guitarists have been working on the better half of maybe like 20, 30 years to try to achieve this compromise of having the sound of a real amplifier, which uses this old vacuum tube technology within a digital form. So with that kind of stuff, a lot of it is I'm recreating what in the studio would be literally a refrigerator sized kind of rack setup with all these different processors to get the sounds on those Celine records. And now with the technology, we can do it with something pretty close for that's a little smaller, it's quieter, it's cheaper, and it's more reliable too. So there's definitely a learning curve to using this stuff. But like anything in theaters, the technology is always moving. And with this show too, I wanted to make sure we were doing everything we could to be on that front end of things, trying to do the cutting edge, just because at the end of the day, shows need to be moving the standard forward. to encourage, that Broadway keeps the quality that it's always had. So just doing those little things like that is part of ensuring that the train keeps rolling.
I love hearing that too because I've gotten to hear different perspectives in terms of the different areas of the production and how things were tweaked or changed or upgraded for Broadway, and in terms of not just making it run smoother, but also making it run longer. Like everything has to be durable, everything has to work in a way that will survive 8 shows a week.
For sure,
So
yeah.
it's amazing to hear the musical side of things and how helpful that is to both you and those that are singing. Yeah, I think technology can be very helpful, especially in a show like this where there's a lot going on. It's like chaotic joy on the stage.
For sure. There's no intermission, there's no take two. Like, it just has to work. And thankfully it does most of the time.
Yeah, it all comes together.
Mhm.
And I could see how that would bring joy to everyone who's part of this production and just a happiness and a warmth. And you see it on the stage and the energy, you see it when you guys come out of the stage door. And I'm wondering in general in your life, because you have so many hats that you wear, is there a specific area of your life and career where you really find a lot of personal joy, like beyond every bit that brings you the happiness that you feel? But is there a part of it that's a lot more personal to you that you just know that it kind of feeds your soul more than anything else?
I mean, I'd say with everything I'm doing, I try not to do things I don't like. And I'm fortunate that I'm at this point with my work that I generally am able to just take the opportunities that appeal to me and feel fulfilling, whether it's the show, touring, sessions, stuff like that. And I love the show. It's been incredible seeing it grow. I think that's probably the main thing. When I play it, I've had the show memorized for some time now. So I end up just spending most of the show looking at the actors, looking at the audience, people watching, trying to see which celebrities are in. That's always fun. It's a little harder now that we have so many more people. But just seeing those reactions, that's the part of that show that brings me the most excitement. All in all, though, I'd say when it comes to filling my bucket, touring and getting to play live with a band like I do with Mark it's a lot of fun. And it's one thing I think with musicals, because there's that acting component, the music often is a necessary second to what's going on. So as a result, whatever feedback that the audience is sending back on stage, it's a little more muted to some degree. Versus when you're playing as part of a group and doing that on stage, you feel this really direct energy that's really thrilling to me. And we've been lucky, we've done some bigger festivals and stuff, some bigger shows over the last few years. And getting to feel that energy and kind of bounce a little bit of it back is the coolest feeling. And it's really gone beyond my wildest dreams with just some of the opportunities we've had, especially last year.
I could only imagine. Yeah, I think that energy with a live audience is always super surreal. And like you said, it's different from working the show where you're not at the front of the stage and then you're part of the band that you get to do that and you get to connect a lot more directly. And I've heard from so many people, depending on like where you're touring in the city and whatever, the energy is always a little different. And sometimes it's a little more lively, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's like more like rowdy, like energy in a good way. And other times it's more like you're just really loving it and passionate. And so for you, were there any moments in performing over the years that really stood out to you that you just felt like wow, like this is magic?
The most recent one was probably last summer. With Mark, we got to do a ton of festivals in the States and Europe and Canada. And just a few of those were these bucket list venues, getting to go to places I'd never been before. It was really cool. Like, we went to Portugal and got to spend around 4 days there. There's this festival called Nos Alive, and it's the biggest show I've ever done. It might be the biggest I'll ever do. We'll see. But it was 70,000 people on stage. We were on the main stage and we were opening up. We were the first band on. Then it was Benson Boone, Noah Kahn, then Olivia Rodrigo. These fans had come real early just to secure their spots at the front of the stage. And it was surreal. Just you're kind of peeking out before you go on stage and you couldn't see where the people stopped. It was really weird. It was very cool. And we get on stage, we do that thing, and it just felt like we were on autopilot, just doing the thing. Like it was hard to take everything in. It was happening. It was a sensory overload. But to get to do that and just feel that energy, it was almost like you're fighting a bull or something. It was such a cool feeling. And I really enjoyed it. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you are still so early on in what you're doing and achieving so much already that you're destined for doing so much more of what you want to do and probably some surprises that you'd never even dreamed of. So I'm rooting for you because it sounds magical. And you're also instilling that in other people and teaching. So I'm curious about that. What are some common challenges you see in young guitarists today and musicians in general, and what advice do you give them about building a sustainable career in music?
Great question. I love teaching, and it's something that I've always enjoyed doing, which is fortunate, I think. Especially in New York, there's always going to be a dearth of teaching jobs. And I think a lot of people end up doing the work without being able to enjoy it or the situations being ideal. And I've been lucky that I've had some really great students over the years, that really want to be there and want to kind of grow, which makes it so much easier. One of the worst feelings in the world that I wish upon no one is you're teaching. Typically, it's a small kid because they're not the ones paying for the lesson, but they just don't want to be there. It's the longest 30 minutes of your life, or God forbid, 45 minutes. With teaching, though, when it's the right circumstances, having the ability to shape someone's journey for the better is such a wonderful feeling. It's the same high that I get from performing to some sense, seeing someone break through, take something and running with it themselves. A lot of times I'll be working with people younger than me, older than me. It's a really diverse group. And with guitar specifically, a lot of times people will come to me because they want to grow their improvising abilities. And what's interesting about improvising is there's not really a set curriculum, unlike a lot of classical music where there's been method books and a specific repertoire that people have been playing for the last few hundred years. With improvising, it's a lot less of a written tradition. And because of that, it can be a lot harder to teach. So figuring out ways to connect with people and whatever those lifelines are, it's a really interesting process and it's not a one size fits all approach. There's a few things I know that often help people kind of get to certain spots that they feel better about themselves, certain exercises we can do. But a lot of it is just finding what works for the student themselves. And, we're all listening to different music, we're inspired by different things, and our goals are different too. Like you mentioned, working in the industry, there's a lot of people I've taught that enjoy just doing music for fun and don't really see themselves doing it as a career, which in some sense can be very liberating for a lot of people because they're, like you mentioned, your self worth and stuff, your value. I think in our society can often be very tied to how we're succeeding within that capitalist system. So a lot of times the hobbyists can have a little more fun in some sense. But yeah, to answer your question, I guess, long story short, some advice for any musician when it firmly comes to the playing end, without thinking about the commerce, without the career, I'd say to be confident in what inspires you. And there's nothing wrong with wherever that inspiration's coming from. Like a lot of times I look at Nicholas, who did the arrangements, orchestrations, co created the show. He's the hugest Britney Spears fan, and he went to Berklee throughout his whole time, he's done all the things, but he still goes back to Britney and that music from his childhood that he loves. And you hear it in the show too. And it could be very easy to brush that off and think that's not the right thing to be listening to get where you want to be. And he's done just fine. So there's really not one path to be confident in the things that you love and to have the, I guess, the integrity that you can showcase those things or let them grow. That's a huge part, I think, of growing as an artist.
I love that advice, and I think it's such a beautiful life lesson in general. And the wording you use also a lifeline in terms of getting through to some of these students. And so I'm curious, what is your lifeline in your career and the things do you do that just feeds your soul and is just true to yourself?
A big part of it is having the opportunities to learn, to grow, and to kind of get out of the comfort zone. There's something I find that's very liberating about not knowing anything about a topic. Because as we get older and the more stuff we do, you don't get those opportunities as much, I find. So whenever you have the chance to just dive into something, I find that really exciting. And it's always cool to use your past experiences to inform what you're doing in the present. So doing new things, that's a big part of it for me. Another is going back to the old things that are why I love what I do, whether it's playing, older styles that are what I grew up on, or diving into some of those things that I just love to geek out about, whether it's guitar gear or great albums. Having ways that you can keep that spark alive, that's, I think, the key to being able to allow it to be sustainable for yourself.
And I think that's, yeah, how you keep that sustainable, keep your fire lit, and you keep moving ahead. And I love the idea of not knowing things and wanting to explore, wanting to learn more, always wanting to move ahead. And I think that applies not only to learning about topics and skills, but also just not knowing what else is out there that you're capable of achieving. I love that lesson that I keep hearing from different people who had a specific dream and maybe they got it or didn't, but then they end up achieving something else that they never even dreamed of getting and having or experiencing. And the beauty in that, like the world is so much bigger than we think it is sometimes. And I think especially in music, that can be very powerful.
For sure. And I think the key thing with that is being able to get those opportunities where you are that unproven quantity. It can be really difficult. And it can also shut a lot of people out of areas that they thrive in or do great in. But when you have those opportunities, just being able to run with them, it's such a gift. And I mean, like, you've talked to Melissa already, who's just phenomenal on stage. And this is her first show as doing it on Broadway. It's so cool to see, like, even from the tech rehearsals to now, like, how she's kind of grown the role and made those little tweaks, found the things that work for her. Like, it's really cool. That's what I love about doing the show, just seeing everything refine. I was talking to John Riddle, our Cal, and just asking him about like trying new jokes and stuff, finding the material that lands and what that's like. And it's so interesting. It's very similar to what we're doing on a musical level, just in a different area. But I think everyone has that experience where you're constantly trying to just refine it a little bit or get it that nth, that like extra percent. And it's a really cool to get to witness that in other people as well.
It is, and I feel like Titanique specifically gives you room to do that exploring and to tweak things and to change it up or try something new, which is also a beautiful part of it. You know, I feel like it to have that freedom is rare, and there's probably other places and productions that are a lot more like, no, this is what we got to do, and it has to be specifically like this, and that's it. But to have that freedom kind of not only keeps it fresh and exciting, I think, but helps each creative person that's involved kind of explore and figure out what connects with them, which is a beautiful thing.
For sure. We saw it a lot off Broadway too, just because we had a lot more turnover with the actors, I guess. Like, usually we'd be having new roles coming in at least every 6 months, maybe like 4 to 6 months or so. And just seeing each person's different approaches to the same role would be so much fun. Like, Ruth was one where so many comedic geniuses went through. The way Russell Daniels did it versus Joel Wagner or something, or Drew Droege, Nathan Lee Graham, or also our swings like Garrett Palladian. Like, all of these folks had a different plan of attack, and they were all so interesting to see. Joel in particular, like, he just, I don't know if you know him, he's a phenomenal musician, music director, as well as an actor, comedian. But he had come on fairly late into our run, and he kind of just subverted so many things. Like, I've never seen so many actors break on stage, never heard like louder laughs. Just, it was so interesting to see that. And it's one of those things too, when you're doing the same thing for 3 years, it can be easy to kind of get on that autopilot. And when you have people like that who are still just pushing things or changing things, it keeps everyone on their toes and elevates everyone.
It does, and it's so funny that, you know, I've said it a few times, but the show keeps finding new life, which is so ironic considering what the ending of the show is. But breathing new life, like you said, is part of that. And I think the metaphor really works there where there's room for that and it's built into the DNA of the show, which is the beauty of it on every level. Just the design, the music, the acting, everything. Like it just all comes together really well. Goes to show why it has such a fan base. I think they're called Titaniques.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, we've been very lucky to have fans that have connected with the show in the way they have, and to have that connection that they want to see the show multiple times and really support the actors in their other endeavors too. Like, it's a very special relationship that you can't take for granted. Like, at the end of the day, though there is a certain employer on paper, the fans are your ultimate employees because them being in those seats or not is determining if you have a job or not. So we've been very lucky with it. And the word of mouth, the guerrilla marketing that spawned, I think really helped the show get to where it is. It's difficult a lot of times when you have new works or developmental works to kind of let them take those leaps. So a lot of times things can take years before they get from one stage to the other, from the reading to off Broadway, from off Broadway to Broadway. They might do like an out of town tryout run, a lot of different things. This show, even though it seems like a long time to me, it's really grown in a very short amount of time. And we've been very lucky for that.
Yeah, it's just amazing to see what it is right now. And it got an extension, which is incredible, and
Hmm.
was nominated for a bunch of Tonys, which is also incredible. And it just seems like everyone is celebrating this incredible show. So it's amazing to be able to talk to different people who are different part of different areas of this production because it's amazing to just see everyone's perspective and you as someone who has been with it since before it moved to the Broadway stage is incredible too because you got to see kind of different incarnations and more of where it started out and your mentor being in that chair before I think is also a beautiful thing and just makes your path very magical and with all the experiences you've had and you've talked about playing at this huge festival and teaching and so I'm wondering where do you find magic in the world most.
I think it's in the relationships with other people and seeing other people find their joys and get to experience them. It's a really cool feeling. With performing, one of the coolest things to me is the the impermanence to things, which is slowly fading away, I think, with the social media era, with phones and everything. But there's something very cool to me about the concept of putting your life on the line to deliver this piece of emotion. And then once it's gone, it's gone. And being able to have shared that moment with other people around you, even if you don't know each other, it bonds people. And it's that shared feeling. It's the same thing as when you're watching a great movie and you just start walking out when the credits roll, or going to a great show, seeing anything, seeing like a piece of nature, for example, like going to a national park and that view you get when you get to the top of the hike. Like there's so many opportunities for this shared connection with people that you otherwise wouldn't see or wouldn't feel. So it's a special thing, this whole thing.
I think that's beautiful, and it really sums up live performing in general also, where there's this shared experience and that connection both on and off the stage and between everyone in that room. So it's a beautiful thing, and like you said, it is very magical. And that leads me to my last question, which is how do you hope to create magic for others?
I think a big part of it is going to be continuing to find outlets to express or get to be a part of groups that uplift people or provide that experience for others, whether it's doing shows, working with artists. There's so many things that you do in the short term that you don't realize might have like a long term effect or something. Whether it's the song that comes out in the 80s and then gets rediscovered like a few months ago, or whether it's an artist having like a late career resurgence or something over time. There's so many things where this path, this growth, it's non-linear and you can never predict what's going to happen. So just being around and doing the things that you feel are righteous or doing the right things for yourself, I think it always ends up paying off one way or another.
I love that perspective. And I think that's really just sums up the magic of life in general and the path. So Alex, thank you for sharing your story and your journey and just your perspective on things. I think it's no surprise that you are just having all these amazing moments and experiences and doing what you love because your heart is really in it and it shows your perspective on life and your passion for it comes through in everything that you're doing. And so before we wrap up, I normally tell people to if they're listening to go out there and do some magic. So I would love for you to say your name and just say to everyone listening, go out there and do some magic.
All right. I'm Alex Mak. For those of you listening, go out there, do some magic.
You heard them. And September 20th, see Titanique through September 20th on Broadway. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.